today we are in Loomis, California. It's a cool, crisp morning. I'm actually have a great guest with you. I'm here with Kevin Marini, the master of master gardeners of Placer County. How's it going there, Kev?
Wonderful. Thank you for the invitation today.
Well, thanks for meeting with us. We're talking fruit trees, bare root fruit trees, and I was told you are a master pruner when it comes to pruning and taking care of your fruit trees. A lot of us at home, I know I've been in my orchard pruning fruit trees at the school. A lot of folks are either working on trees they already have established or considering pruning the ones that they're maybe planting. So let's cover it all. Where do we start?
Well, I think we should start with the tools that are needed for fruit tree pruning. And believe it or not, there's very few of them, which is nice. You don't need a lot of tools. First thing, obviously, is your good old hand pruners. These are called bypass hand pruners. They do have another type of hand pruner called an anvil pruner. You want the bypass ones for this type of pruning, okay? Those anvil ones are usually used for like dead wood. So, hand pruners for sure. Loppers, a nice pair of loppers for those larger cuts that you might have to make. And for even larger cuts, a good old folding saw like this will do, a pruning saw. For the most part, if a cut is going to be over 3 inches, you pause and hesitate and really make sure you want to make a cut that large. So for the most part, having hand
By
pruners,
3 inches, you mean the diameter of the branch?
Diameter of the branch. And so these tools in general take care of 90% of your pruning needs. Obviously, large mature fruit trees may necessitate chainsaw.
So no chainsaw or reciprocating saw for this little
No
little
chainsaw
gal?
needed here. And then finally, don't forget your gloves, because that's, number one on a chilly morning like this, just keeps your hands warm, but it protects your hands from any, stray pruning.
Absolutely. So Kev, we got a little nectarine here, fairly young tree. Where do we start? This one's been planted recently. How do we begin? I know we really want to get our fruit trees off to a really good start.
Yep.
And how do we do that?
Okay, so when a fruit tree is originally planted, it can be planted bare root or from a container, but it's really, really important to understand that there is a rootstock portion and a scion or an upper portion, and this is a graft union. So many people don't understand this very first part of how a fruit tree is put together. And it's super important because growth can occur from the rootstock, and that variety is not the good edible one that's up here. And so at a very basic level, just understanding that there's a rootstock, that's one variety that's not your preferred
Why is this done? Who's mad enough to be grafting these?
Yeah.
They saw the scion, they added it to another one. What's going on?
So
Mad scientists.
These rootstocks confer some benefits to whatever variety you're growing up here. So some disease resistance, in some cases drought tolerance, in some cases just actually tamping down the vigor of the tree because they can be so vigorous. So there's lots of different reasons why rootstocks are chosen, but for the most part, it's for the overall well-being of the tree in different types of soils. And so understanding that this is a graft union that is very fragile and needs to be above ground and not buried. So looking at this nectarine.
So that's the graft union right here on this one?
We can see right here, here's the graft union. You can see the rootstock coming up and this top variety, which is Fantasia, grafted right there.
Sounds delicious.
This has to be above ground. So that is probably the most important part when you're first getting started, making sure that graft union's up.
So keep it up above, and you're not going to be piling soil up to that little bump there, right?
Protect this. Don't let that get covered up. Yep.
Fantastic.
Then, when you're planting a fruit tree, for the most part, we're really wanting people to keep fruit trees small. Because once a fruit tree gets very large, it becomes cumbersome to manage it, okay? So for management purposes, keeping it small is crucial. This, is perfect.
So best practices early on is best.
Yeah. So if we took off all these branches and started the tree here, as you can imagine, eventually it's going to be much taller than we can access unless we have a ladder.
And we don't want that here.
And we don't want that.
This is a home garden orchard. We want everything within reach, 6 to 8 feet.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so we have to look at starting way down here, okay? And so even though all of this may be necessary while the tree is young to provide some protection for it, especially sunburn protection, we're going to actually look at our first scaffold branches, the branches that are going to create the form of this tree down here. And this has some great candidates for scaffold branches. I would even say to go down to, this level here, because this branch, say you chose this as a scaffold branch, would eventually grow potentially all the way out here, right? And so it's hard for people to understand that pruning creates a growth response, right? So a lot of people think, well, I'm taking away biomass.
Like I'm
so
hurting it.
I'm hurting it, I'm shrinking it. The reality is the response of taking away that biomass is extensive growth, vigorous growth. So you're promoting growth, right? So every time you make a pruning cut, it is a wound for the tree, so you want to be judicious in how many pruning cuts you're making, but understand that...
So just go wild on it and just go, like, more is better, cut it all off.
The more cuts you make,
no, don't
the
do that.
more openings for those bacteria and fungi to get in there and possibly cause problems. So be judicious with your pruning cuts, make sure you're not just willy-nilly cutting a bunch of stuff off. So the first step is to identify those scaffold branches. So what you want in this situation is a tree that has an open center, okay? So the branches are gonna come out to the sides, but the area in the middle is gonna remain open.
What's the benefit of having an open center?
The biggest benefit is airflow, disease resistance, right? Having good airflow through the tree. And I believe it's easier to maintain for home gardeners because you can really see the different parts really well. The other style of pruning is called central leader, which is kind of what this is looking like right now, right?
Yeah.
It's keeping a leader that's gonna grow up, 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 and up, and kind of have a Christmas tree shape, rather than these branches that are kind of like a wine glass coming out, right? And so the central leader is used by commercial orchards, but for the home gardener, the open center is a little bit more manageable because that central leader can get out of control very quickly.
All right, so Kev, so before we move on, where would you actually make the cut on this tree? If you were to do, this is one that you're gonna be chopping up right now, you got it planted,
Yep.
You want to start that scaffold nice and low.
Yep.
Where would you actually make that cut?
So I would go all the way down here, because remember, these branches are going to elongate and get huge. And so I would choose branches that have good angles here. You don't want
it's only
real
a foot
narrow.
off the ground.
I
You're
know.
losing so much. Are you sure it's
know.
okay?
It is, because these branches are going to go out and get huge. So picking branches that are on opposite sides and that have some vertical spacing is ideal. So maybe this is one, this is one, this is one over here, and maybe this one up here. So you have branches going off of each side, and you have vertical spacing between them, so that if something happens, you may be able to prune that out in the future and still save some of your tree. So I know it's intense to be able to lose all of this, but at the same time, by picking low scaffold branches, you keep low fruit trees.
All right, so Kevin, this is something I see a lot in the orchard, at the school, and at my home. What is going on here, and what should we do?
So this is really crucial for home orchardists to understand, that like I showed you before, a fruit tree is a top variety grafted upon a rootstock. And all this growth is coming from underground, from the rootstock, not from the variety up here. And so all of this has to be removed, because none of it is going to make good fruit, and it's just going to clog up the area. So this can all be pruned at any time of year. That is really amazing, because there's so many fruit tree pruning jobs that are winter pruning and summer pruning, right? And when it comes to suckers, these are basically called suckers that are coming from the rootstock.
They are little suckers too.
They are little suckers, and you can remove all of them at any time of year that you see them coming
How
out.
low do we cut?
Cut all the way to the ground. Now this has some mulch around it, so you can even dig around and cut a little bit more and just get rid of those suckers. Now, people say, well, they probably will regrow. Well, maybe. A lot of the sucker growth has to do with the health of the overall tree. So if the tree is very healthy, you usually have less sucker growth than one that is compromised, that throws up a bunch of survival suckers. But get rid of all these any time of year.
Now, Kevin, I've noticed just beyond the suckers, and maybe this is actually leading into what you just mentioned, but this tree looks a little distressed. You
Yeah.
said if it's unhealthy, maybe suckers are a little more prevalent? What is going on with this tree trunk right here?
Yeah, so when a tree is very young, it's recommended to paint the bark with a whitewash. It's a 50-50 blend of water and latex white paint. And so many people have been driving around and seen people's orchards and go, why are their trees white, right? Well, the reason why is to protect the tree from sunburn, believe it or not. So it's like sunscreen for the tree. And what happens when you don't do that, you get sunburn, you get fissures in the bark. When you get fissures in the bark and this type of damage, you're opening up doors for pathogens to enter and develop cankers or other types of diseases. So even though this is relatively mature bark now, it should have been painted in its earlier years to protect it from getting sunburn.
All right, so Kevin, can you demonstrate a few of the cuts that we're gonna be making on these trees? Like, where do we start? What are the cuts?
Yeah, no, good question. Now, in the fruit tree world, many times when you look at the literature online, they talk about two types of cuts in the fruit tree world. But as a certified arborist, I go by the arborist way of looking at pruning cuts, and there's three types of cuts, okay? The first one is called a heading cut, also known as a topping cut, reducing the size of a branch just kind of randomly. So if I just make a topping or heading cut right there to reduce this branch back, I've made it between two nodes, and therefore there's a bunch of latent buds in here that are going to pop and regrow. That's the growth response for a heading cut. So you get a whirl of new growth out of a heading cut. When you do a reduction cut, you're reducing the size of the branch back to another lateral branch. So the energy is not going to create a whirl of growth. The energy is going to go into that lateral branch. Finally, a thinning cut takes a branch out all the way back to its origin, back here. So if I wanted to thin this branch out, I would go all the way back to where it's connected to a main lateral and make the cut there for a thinning cut.
Now that we know that the thinning, the heading, the reduction cuts, those are the ones we make, but where do we start when we actually go to attack our fruit trees?
Yeah.
What limbs are we looking to get rid of instantly?
Yeah, and what's really great is there's a rule of thumb to use that makes it really easy for anyone just approaching a fruit tree and thinking, what do I do first? And that is the 3 Ds, dead, dying, diseased branches. So if you see a dead branch and you know it's dead, cut it out of there. If one is broken and dying, cut it out of there. If you know there's some disease in the tree, cut those things out. That's the first step, really easy. Then you're looking for branches that compromise the structure, right? So branches like this that are touching, rubbing like that, you're gonna make some judgment calls. Don't let those branches rub against each other. Any branches that are growing back into the middle of the tree, so things like this, right, grow into the middle, you want to get rid of those and maintain that open center.
What about this one right here? It's going towards the ground.
Absolutely. So these are real easy pruning decisions to make, right? Dead, dying, disease, crossing, rubbing, compromising your structure, make those first, and that's the bulk of your pruning right there.
Right, all right, so now we know how to prune. When do we actually do this?
Yeah, so, you know, a lot of people think that the only time to prune fruit trees is in the dormant season, the winter season, when deciduous fruit trees are dormant, don't have the leaves on. But the reality is pruning is kind of a year-round thing, because those dead, dying, and diseased branches can be pruned out all year round. Suckers can be pruned out all year round, right? And you can do summer pruning of very vigorous shoots. You can prune those down to help maintain the smallness of the tree. So really, pruning is a combination of dormant pruning, summer pruning, and year-round maintenance. It's all of that.
Have you found that when you use that technique of all year-round approach, that it makes it easier when you do go out there to prune?
I think so, because you're not dealing with a complete mess at one time of year because you've kept up with it throughout the year.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you so much, Kev. I know there's so much more to learn from you, so of course we're going to have you back for some more garden adventures.
Great.
So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
No problem. It was fun.